Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just giving it a moment while a few other people join, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, you can just make sure you can see my screen. If you can't, you can reach out to the chat and I'll help you sort that out. Thanks. Awesome. All right, let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining me today. Um, everyone, if anybody can't hear me at all, just you can reach out with the chat. And also you'll see on your toolbar, we have a chat option. So any issues you have at all, just make sure you reach out through that. If you do have any issues along the way with audio or connection, we are recording the session and will be uploaded to YouTube after later on. So without further ado, thank you for joining me today for today's webinar on scenarios. So today we're going to continue to take a look at how to create a long-term view of your farm with scenarios. My name is Sudesh and I'm your host for today. I'm a partner success manager here at Figured. So before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping rules when it comes to using Zoom. So this will help everyone get the best experience and also cut out any noise or help you get back into the webinar should you lose it. So the first is we recommend that you close down as many apps as you can on your computer during the webinar to give you the best opportunity to stream clearly. So it's not only your internet connection and speed, sometimes it may be the number of things you have open on your computer or laptop. So close everything down and just leave Zoom open. That should improve your experience. If you lose what's happening anytime at all along the way, just look for that Zoom icon you see on your screen now, anywhere in your bottom toolbar. Click on it and that should reopen you into the webinar. And lastly, if you have a question during the webinar, there's a Q&A option on your bottom toolbar. You can go ahead and ask it in there, and I'll usually leave those to the end and we'll come back and answer them so everybody can get the best benefit of it. So if you have a broader question or question you think might be useful, definitely use that. However, if you're having issues along the way with Zoom or you wanted to ask something about something we're covering before we move past it, you can more than put that into the chat, and either myself or more than likely one of the team on the call will jump in and give you a hand. But if you think it's good and other people could benefit, wait till the end and we'll just talk it over with everyone and everyone will get the benefit. Great, let's get started. So I'd like to quickly talk about our webinar series and what you can expect to see in the upcoming sessions. So we'll be running 2 sessions each week over the next 4 weeks on a Tuesday and a Thursday. So we're into our second run now. We had our first run last week. Those videos are up on YouTube if you want to have a view of it. We've also kicked off our planning series, which has already just completed its first run as well. So what are we taking a look at? So our first 2 webinars, we covered the importance of aligning your long-term financial plan with your goals and ambitions. So we look closely at how we achieve this using Figured scenario planning tool. So that's the series that you're in right now. So we've been taking a look at scenarios. And the first session, we took a look at how to create it and set up an opening position. And today we'll take a look at how to complete that scenario and start gaining some insights. The other series that's running in parallel at the moment is with my colleague Scott, where he's covering the annual plan or your 12-month budget. So that's how you take changes generated from your scenario and turn them into actionable insights to incorporate into an annual plan. So those sessions with Scott, like I said, the first 2 have already completed. They'll be up on YouTube for anybody who wants to kick off with them as well. Alternatively, you can wait till next week and we'll be going through them in another round again, roughly around to a similar time, I think, as well. There might be a round of sessions that are later on as well. So if you feel like maybe this time was not, you couldn't have as good of concentration, excuse me, you can look back around. I think it's a 7 p.m. slot, if I'm not mistaken. Back to today's session though. So let's take a look at what we're going to go over today. So we have a brief recap of session 1. Let's have a quick overview of what we covered. Then we'll look at adding and editing income, then adding and editing expenses. Then we'll jump into reports and have a look at how we view them and the different types of reports we have. And then we'll cap off on how to export reports. And we'll also take a look at how to copy a status quo scenario so we can start creating some of the more interesting scenarios. Awesome. So what happens if you need help along the way? So we've got a live chat option. So you can reach out to your accountant in the first instance with this. So they'll either send you to this green bubble yourselves or they'll reach out themselves, but definitely go to your accountant first. They understand your farm, your data, and your business operation a lot better. They also have a lot of skills we provide to them within the practice to help you along as well. But like it says, if you need it, they'll send you to us. Our YouTube channel, so we have our video tutorial channel. Like I said earlier, our previous webinars are loaded up there, or you can find a whole lot of other info on other various parts of the application. At the bottom, we have our blog, so figure.com/blog. So that's a great place to go and look at all the articles that we've been doing with industry experts and also farmers around the country as well. We've also released our Farmer Resource Center. So that's also figure.com/Farmer Resource Center, or you can just go to figure.com and find that there. So that's been popped up in light of the recent lockdowns and difficulty with working. And so that's a great place to go if you want to find out how to get help, which is what we're seeing here, or how to receive some good information, or how to get registration links, anything that you think might be pertinent to you and your journey on Figured as a farmer, jump onto that resource center and it's gonna help you out. Awesome, so let's take a quick overview of scenarios and why we found ourselves here. And so I wanted to cover the now how principle and how we like to talk about designing a scenario so you make sure that you get the valuable insights out the other end. So with everyday decision-making becoming increasingly harder, it's really important to know where you stand and how you can make the right choices, and more importantly, make the right choices at the right time. So this now how concept helps you plan for today and the future so you can be confident and drive success. So we apply this to the scenario tool and help us step through. And so in the scenario tool itself, if we take a look at how we do this, we start off by building a detailed 2 to 10 year plan. So there's a lot of flexibility there between 2 and 10 years. You start by building now. So this is a business as usual plan that takes your last 12 months of financial data and steps it forward by 5 years. So doing this helps create a picture of where your business is headed in its current state. This becomes your guide. Something you might want to find that your current trajectory is not what you expected and an immediate change might be required. So that last point is really interesting where, even though it's a status quo and just helps you set the base, sometimes your current business trajectory may be interesting and you may need to make a change immediately. So the way is your tailored scenario plan for any future events. So this could be a goal you currently have, such as selling certain portions of the business, succession planning to help the next generation take over. You can also plan for rainy day, emergency, price fluctuations, etc. So the world's your oyster when it comes to scenarios. As long as you can model it, it's there to be modeled. The how is a 12-month plan that helps you translate your long-term goals into an actionable and achievable short-term goal. So this harkens back to the sessions I spoke about earlier, my colleague Scott, where he's covering how to use Figured's planning grid to get the best out of your plan, but also take the insights from your scenario and use it to build that 12-month plan. Awesome. Now let's jump back into our scenario and we'll pick off where we left off the last time. Like I mentioned in the last session, if you are working along with us, make sure you're doing so at a pace that's not stressful for you, either with dual screens or you're quite comfortable jumping back and forth. If you aren't, I would suggest just following along and really absorbing what we're covering in today's session, and you can go onto YouTube afterwards, have a look at the video and pause it and move through it slowly in conjunction with your own scenario. Awesome. So first, let's take a look at what we've done and what's left to do. So in our last session, we completed the opening position and took a look at editing our proposition items. So today we're going to take a look at income, expenses, the summary report, and then we'll move on to the full reports and how to export your scenario as well. So first comes income. So you expand income by clicking on the income title itself. So here we see when we click on it, the first thing we're going to see is our 2 trackers that we imported, a milk tracker and a livestock tracker. So let's take a look, first of all, at our livestock tracker. So we click anywhere in the highlighted area here, and that's going to take us into our dairy cattle tracker. Awesome. So here we see the livestock control area. From the top, if we start from the top, we can see the auto calculations, there at the top, along with configure livestock. So more on that in a second. But more importantly, we see the stock rec and the ability to click into any movements and start adding these. So these are the blue links in the highlighted area. So right now, with the way that it's set, any blue link that you can see, you can enter information into that. So right now they're all set to 0, of course, because there haven't been any movements entered in. But if you had a whole lot of movements in the year that you imported in from your stock rec, you'll find an exact replica here. What it did bring in, you can see on the left, is the opening position from our main tracker. So to add a movement, we can click anywhere, like I said before, on the highlighted blue links. In this case, we're going to click a sale of an R2 heifer. So when we click on that, the first thing we see is a very, very simple sales window. We see here the ability to add in a date, quantity, whether it's live or carcass weight, the amount, and whether that amounts at a head per kilo or total. What we can also do is add another transaction, and we can do this by clicking on the blue Add Transaction button. So as you can see here, for those of you who are familiar with the Figured Stock Rec, it's a little bit simpler, and it's obviously because you're not working with really accurate, up-to-date data. You're more working with data that's part of a scenario. So you can quickly add information in and chop down and get a good amount of data in a very short amount of time if you so happen to have not had an imported stock rec. Also, so now that we've added a new transaction in, or we know how to add in a movement manually, let's take a look at the automatic calculations. So the auto calculations allows you to automate births, deaths, and the aging process for livestock over the course of the scenario. So you can enable this by clicking the auto calculations as highlighted just there, and that's going to produce a drop-down. So this drop-down will show the tick boxes for enabling auto calculations. So we can see the auto aging, births, and auto deaths. So you can tick or untick these options and then just select update on the right-hand side. And that's going to go ahead and update and enable the automatic calculations for you. Now, if we take a look just there, we go back a second. If we take a look there, what the automatic calculations look like when they're added in, you'll notice that the areas you now have enabled are non-editable. They can only be edited once you turn off automatic calculations. So while automatic calculations are great, we can see that they've now automated the births and the aging, as well as some deaths in there too. It removes your ability to edit those particular values. So once you turn it on, it's good to have a sense check through and make sure that it hasn't blown anything out of proportion in terms of what would actually be viable on farm. Like I said, if it is on and you want to turn it off, you can go ahead and click the clear quantities option we see up there in gray. And that clear quantities option is going to clear only your automated transaction. That's a good point to hold. If you've gone ahead and put in a bunch of purchase and sale transactions after the fact, and you then want to remove your aging, you can untick them and tick clear quantities. And when you hit update, it's just going to remove the automatic quantities. So if you need to change, however, the way the automatic calculations behave, so you like the automatic calculations, you like the way they're behaving, but maybe they're a little bit too high, or maybe they're not aggressive enough, you can go ahead and change the way that these work. You do that by clicking on Configure Livestock. We see there up on the top right-hand corner, and that takes us into the livestock management area. So here we can edit automatic calculation values as well as set the valuation of our herd. So that's at the very top one just here. So the important part to remember with livestock management is that you can edit the automatic calculations, but there's also an additional option to change or edit the value of your herd. And that's shown just here where we see valuations just there, birth rates, and death rates. Now to edit these values, as we see here, we are seeing the birth rates where we have two of our breeding stock and they're sitting at a 90% birth rate. We just click into where it says 19, that's going to allow us to edit it. And the same applies to the death rates as we see below. That's currently set to a default of 2%. Now these two, as I said before, apply to just the automatic calculations, whereas the valuations do not. They apply to the actual valuation of your herd as it shows up on your balance sheet. So on your balance sheet, you will see the value of your entire herd. If you're wondering where that value is generated from, it's the amount of stock you have against the values that you're seeing on the screen now. So these are by default herd scheme. So if you create a brand new blank scenario, you've not done nothing else, we will automatically assign the most recent herd scheme values to your herd. Now obviously that may not be correct. If that is the case, you just go ahead into this window here and either change them to NSC, or match them up to the correct herd value. Now, what's also interesting about this is you can also use this to simulate a herd to NSC or just a change of valuation method as per the IRD. So if you're unsure what that might mean, there's quite a few different implications to it. But the financial side of it in terms of the numbers, you can model that out here using this valuation option over the various years. Awesome. So now that we've taken a look at livestock, let's jump in and have a look at milk. So again, milk, another imported tracker that we brought in from the main part of Figured. To access it, just click anywhere in that highlighted area, and that's going to jump you into the milk tracker. The milk tracker has a few parts to it. So at the top, we see our info about the tracker name, region, operation type, effective area. The main things to note here is that if you've imported the tracker, obviously that's going to be pulled in from your import. If you didn't, when you're going through, make sure you choose the correct operation type. If you need to model out an operation type change, are you going from contract to share to full, or even as a full, you're bringing on a share milker, for example, whatever the case may be, you might need to model it out using more than one milk tracker. So something to keep in mind. But if that is the case, you can go ahead and add one in, as we'll see in a second. Another important note from there is the milking platform. So we offer some handy farm summary stats that we generate using weights and effective areas and milking platform areas and stuff as you enter them through the scenario. So if you take the time to enter that in into the milking platform, it'll work out some production stats for you around your dairy operation. Awesome. So the next part in the middle is our base milk information, such as production, price, and peak cows. So this is what you see in a blank scenario or one that was not imported. So if you had started it from a complete blank scenario, the bottom section we're about to look at will not be there. You'll only see those 3 boxes and they'll all be editable, whereas now at the bottom, the top 2 are non-editable. And the reason for that is because if you are just modeling out some basic information, or maybe your focus is not on your income and you just wanting to enter in, here's my production, here's my price, this is what I generate as an income, not too interested in where that is in the year, because you may be focusing on an asset sale or a new loan or reducing your expenses, and so on and so forth. If that, whatever the case may be, you can just go ahead and use just those 3 boxes. Down the bottom, we're seeing here is the custom monthly values. This is basically your full milk year for each specific year at the top. So whatever year that you have selected with the blue square box around it, we see in the middle section, that's what you're going to be seeing at the bottom. So when you import a tracker in from the main part of Figured, that's going to be bringing in that milk curve and entering it in there. However, if you haven't done that, or you want to change your milk curve, you can do this by enabling this bottom section, and you do that by ticking use custom monthly values. So if we go through that again, if you tick use custom monthly values, it'll bring up a full milk year for each of the years of the scenario and allow you to customize a milk curve. If you've imported your tracker, it'll already show the milk curve because it's been collecting that information in the main milk tracker and Figured, in which case you can use that same curve to spread along as well. So again, if you're a bit confused and you want to edit just the top boxes and you're not unsure how to do that, untick use custom monthly values. If you want to use the full milk year, go ahead and tick use custom monthly values. Awesome. And just to make sure as well, when you are editing, those are the 3 options at the top where you will be able to edit. Awesome. So if you need to add a new tracker or an additional income source, we can also do this. So let's definitely take a look at that now. We do that by ticking add income on the bottom left. So for add income, this takes us into the add income window. So here we can add in new income trackers, or we can use the other income option as well. So on the left here, we see milk production, crops, horticulture, and livestock. So before I mentioned, if you needed to create a new operation type, for example, for milk, you'd click on add income, click on milk production, that would generate a new milk tracker. And the same for livestock, a new livestock tracker. But the important part on this window here is the other income. Obviously, the top 4 income sources are not going to be covering all of the income streams that you might have on farm or in your general business operation. And being able to collect all of your income sources in one place is going to give you the best chance of getting an accurate scenario. And so to do that, you can use the other income option to code in any income sources that aren't part of the tracker itself. And so in this case here, we see milk company dividends and rebates, among a few others that have been used here to capture some other income sources. So if you are wondering where these codes are generated from, these are part of your chart of accounts that you have as sitting in Xero. So if you needed a new code, you can go ahead and have a chat to your accountant. They can add one in for you into Xero, and that's going to refresh its way into Figured. And if it's an income, a code, sales, or revenue, it's going to show up here, and you can code against it. Awesome. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is expenses. So for expenses, just click on the highlighted area like it's shown here, and that's going to expand out the expenses area. Once it's expanded out, this is what you see. You see the main expenses working area where we see all the different expense types. We've got farm working expenses, lease and rent, interest, depreciation, taxation, personal drawings, and CapEx. Then you also have an add expense option, on the bottom left. And that's also going to take you into the add expense section. Now, quick little tip here is you can click anywhere in this area, and that's going to take you either in the add expense or in that other area, the main working area just there, and it's going to take you to the same window. Sometimes it might be confusing. You're thinking of going to two different places. When it comes to adding expenses, you can't add any new type of expense like you would for trackers. It's just a place for holding expenses, which means clicking anywhere is going to take you to the same window. And here we go. This is the expenses window. So on the left, we see the expense headings, which we just went over before. So let's jump firstly into farm working expenses. So because we imported our expenses, we only see a detailed option, as we see on the top there, tab for detailed. This means we have to enter our expenses individually, but because we imported our expense position, this is already done for us, as we see just here. So again, here's another benefit of making sure if you've got that information in Xero or in Figured, to make sure you import your expense position into the scenario. So you can also search for an expense. So if you have a lot of expenses and it is detailed and you're finding it hard to move up and down this window, just search. Even if you just type in one word, for example, animal, will just bring up all of the codes with animal health, for example. So it's quite handy to just group off codes and stop you having to scroll up and down that window. So on the top right, you also see the option to change the data metric. So by default, it's set to dollar value, but can be changed to any of the options you see there. So dollar per kilogram of milk solids, dollar per cow, or dollar per hectare. So this means you can view, but also enter values based on those metrics. So if you happen to only know some of these values at dollar per a kilogram of milk solids, you can go ahead and enter directly into that and only ever view information based on that as well. So you're not tied just to that dollar value. Now, when you're working within the actual grid itself, if you need to spread something, you need to change a value, just click into the number itself and it becomes an editable field. However, if you needed to spread, as in you made a change in one of the years and you want to spread that change over by a percentage, only for certain years, you want to use the spread tool, and that's down at the very bottom. So we scroll to the very bottom, and there we go. That's what it's going to look like at the very bottom. And on the left of that is going to be the spread option. So in this particular scenario, I've got 2020 and I'm spreading it by 2.5% for the subsequent years. So you can either set that as a negative or a positive percentage, or set it as 0, and it's just going to be a copy function if you set it as 0. So the next section is lease and rent. So this allows us to enter a rent expense like so. So right there we can see our rent expense that we've entered of 19,800, and it's just worked it out for each year and logged it down as a rent expense. But you can also calculate a lease expense. So to do that, you enter in the leased hectares, your cost per hectare, and that's going to work out your total value. Now, the interesting thing about this here is when you got to make sure that you enter in the effective leased hectares as well. So in the middle there you see leased and cost, but you also have to enter in the effective leased hectares. So it has to can be able to actually do the calculation. So if you get caught up on that, just make sure that has been entered. If you're in doubt, just match it up to the leased hectares as well. And then as with the other windows, you also have a spread option at the bottom left, where you're able to spread values across the remaining years of the scenario. Awesome. So our next section is interest. So interest allows us to enter variable interest rates against loans that we already have existing in the scenario. So we see here, we had term loan 021 and term loan 000. They are the two options that are available here. And so we can select those and click on the interest rate and add in a variable interest rate as at a particular date. Now, this is the same as the interest option that's at the very bottom of the loan window in the proposition area. So this is just the same window surfaced in two places. So if whatever changes you make up there, you'll see down here, and vice versa. So this is not a different additional interest rate area. It's just the same screen shown a second time. But more importantly on this section here is overdraft. So overdraft is another tab that we have on the interest rate section. And this is really handy because it allows us to control the overdraft facility that sits within the scenario. So your overdraft facility may have been generated because you created an asset or an opening position that was overdrawn. So there's a system bank account that sits behind each scenario. And if you choose a cash position that's overdrawn or in credit, it's going to be against this balance that sits as the bank account for the scenario. So if you've done that and you've already got an overdraft set up, it's going to populate that information in here, and you can have a look at how you can change your limits over the year by either going up or going down or negotiating new interest rates. Either way, it's going to help you get in or out of overdraft. Alternatively, if you don't have an overdraft, this allows you to simulate what it might look like. So there may be quite a few people going to have a chat to the bank now, both in agriculture and non-agriculture as well, about extending an overdraft. And it's good to know how that impacts the rest of your business. So getting in here and entering those values in, and then comparing that to the rest of your financial position on farm, it's going to be really, really handy in knowing how risky that potential overdraft might be. Great. So the next area is tax. So this is a new feature and calculates tax automatically based on your net profit before tax, which we see just there. So this is just your net profit before tax, your taxable profit that's being calculated in the scenario. If you're in disagreement with any of those numbers, it's because of whatever's been entered into the scenario. So just go back, look over your numbers, and make sure that it's correct before jumping back into this window. But once that's correct, you're able to enter an effective tax rate percentage, and that's going to work out a tax expense for you at the bottom. Now, what you can also do for the first year is enter an opening accrued tax loss. If you're unsure about any of these areas, that some people may be when it comes to tax, have a chat to your accountant or just invite them in and ask them to enter or confirm the information before continuing. Now, next section is personal and drawings, depreciation, and CapEx. Now, the reason I mention these areas together is because they are three manual fields in the expense area. So you don't have any special calculations going on or any connection to any other part of the scenario. They're just basic entry fields to capture those values. So things like personal and drawings and CapEx, fairly straightforward. Just enter in the values as per what you've been doing up to date, and that should update in there. Also a good way for here to test out how moving your drawings up or down may have an effect on the bottom balance, excuse me. So I just had a small issue there, excuse me for that. Yes, so as I was saying, and the next section we're talking about was depreciation. So the reason I mentioned depreciation separately is because a lot of people assume that with the rich asset and liability functionality that we have, that we may have an automated depreciation. It is coming, but right now it's manual. So just make sure you make use of the revaluation option that we looked at in the last session around our assets, and the depreciation function down here to accurately capture those two against your assets and liabilities. Awesome. And then once again here, we've got the spread option. And the spread option is going to sit at the bottom of every single section in income and expenses. So I know I only spoke about it in the expense area, but you also see the spread option sitting in your income trackers as well. That's going to help you spread, for example, milk income without having to go through each individual year. So whenever you see the spread option, make sure you use it. It's going to help you enter information in faster. Awesome, congratulations. That brings us now to the end of our data entry side of the scenario. So at this point, all the data that you need to enter in is done. And moving forward, we're just going to be taking a look at QAing what is in the scenario itself, and then potentially coming back around to make some changes. So let's quickly go through what that looks like. The first is the summary report that sits on the main page. So at the very top, we see a summary report. We expand that out. We're shown two sections, a farm summary area and a financial summary area at the bottom. So with the farm summary area, like I said before, if you've taken the time to enter in those total effective areas and milking platforms, milk production as it shows there, it's going to go ahead and try and work out some really handy farm summary stats around your production and efficiency. So if you haven't taken the time to enter that in, ignore those values because they probably won't be right. But more importantly here, we are shown the financial summary. So the financial summary is a hit list or a highlight list of what's really going on in the scenario. And we're showing you some really important top line items to help you sense check the scenario and make sure that it's on the right path. Whereas here we see now at the top, we've got milk income, direct costs, gross farm income. An important thing to note about this before I move on is that the values that are in above the bold are not the total amount that calculates to the gross farm income. So for example, the 888,900 for gross farm income is not made up of the three numbers that are above it. It is part of the calculation, but there's some other stuff that's not included. And the reason for that is because it is a summary report, it is a highlight reel, and we're just showing you some important stuff so you can sense check your scenario, move up and down without moving to a new page, and then go on to the next section where you can look at a full cash flow report and really break down all of the various areas. But there is a breakdown in there. Irrespective of that, we see here an income breakdown as well, and an expense breakdown, as well as a few other areas down the bottom, like net cash movement and cash on hand. So cash on hand is actually a really, really important one. That's the kind of one where you sense check what is really going on because sometimes you get so carried away with various parts that you just forget about what's the available cash, and that might dip into a really negative area. So use the cash on hand to sense check your scenario, make sure nothing is auto calculating, for example, or going out of control that you haven't set, but also it's a good little handle if cash is a main focus for you. But once we're done with that, over on the bottom right, we just see there with the arrow, click next, and we'll move on to the reports section. So with the reports section, this is where we get to really expand and see a lot of different areas of the scenario, something we haven't really seen so far. So along the way, when you're entering information, it hasn't really been too obvious what the effects of the changes you have made are. And so here on the reports, we can really expand out and take a look at what that really looks like. And so the report types that we have over on the right is summary, P&L, cash flow, balance sheet, and a livestock summary. So for today, in terms of the report functionality, we'll just expand on a cash flow report and see what that looks like. What you also have on this page are indicators. So at the bottom on the left there, you see an indicators options. These are visualizations that help you glean some of the insights from the scenario instead of having to go through the report in detail. So those are really handy for meetings or just for giving you a general idea of where the scenario is going. You can also add notes to your reports. So this is also available on the summary page itself. So you just at the bottom, click on add note, and you can add some notes along to it, and that's going to carry you through the reports as well if you want to print it out. But if you've just got communication going back and forth on the scenario, that add note is going to allow you to communicate with other members of your team. Now into the report itself, we see there on the left, we start looking at some of the areas of the report, such as income, operating expenses, so on and so forth, but they are all collapsed. So we want to expand those out and take a look at what's inside them. And we do that by just clicking on that blue arrow that it's pointing at right now. And when we do that, we see it's now being sectioned off into big areas that we can expand on even more. So for income, we see the various income areas, and then we can expand on those to see where the income is generated. So for dairy cattle, probably have sales and purchases in there. For milk tracker, you've got your production and deferred production, so on and so forth. And then down the operating expenses area, again here, we've got a breakdown into these breeding, irrigation, electricity. So those are those main top line categories that Figure has. But once you expand those, you're then going to be able to find the specific codes that are against that. So here is where bringing in a really, really rich amount of coded expenses comes back around to benefit you. So along most of the way, it didn't really make much sense about why you brought in that thick, rich expense position. But once we get to here and we see this breakdown on an annual scenario, it starts to make sense. So you start to be able to separate out in this example, electricity for the farm, electricity for the house, for example, as well. Awesome. So let's take a look at indicators now. So indicators, we generate that by just expanding on the indicator option, as we can see up there, and that's going to generate this indicator section down here. So the first thing we see, again, is a breakdown of farm summary versus financial summary. So we're taking those same stats that we saw in that summary report for the farm metrics and just putting them into this nice little visual that you see just there. For the financial summary stats, they've been broken down into widgets, things like net profit, milk production, principal interest cover, and then the one that's highlighted there, closing cash position. So while a lot of this might just look exactly like you would expect it to, especially for example, milk production where your production is not actually changing, the closing cash position can be a really interesting one because even though you might have missed it in the summary, it's really hard to miss what we're looking at right there, which is a move, quite a drastic move from $30,000 in the black over to 57 in the red over the course of the 4 years. So that might be intentional for a whole bunch of expansion that you may want to be doing, or it may not be, and that might cause you to go back and have a look at why that's happening. Either way, the indicators are great, but you can imagine having this up on a big slide when you're talking to the whole team as well. If you've got a team on farm, then that could be really handy. And then that brings us down to the last section of the scenario pathway itself, and that's to export. So we're able to export all of the reports that we saw just earlier, which is summary, profit and loss, cash flow, etc. Now, a lot of you may be immediately asking, why can we only export to PDF? That's because Figure is working on some really exciting tools on what you can do with this data, more than likely moving it back to the main planning grid. And so keep an eye out for that. That's going to be coming soon. Now, the last thing you want to do in your scenario is mark it as complete. So the ability to mark a scenario as complete, it doesn't have any actual functional changes, but it does mark it as complete by putting a green tick. So in the scenario, it'll show green as so, but in the main scenario page, you'll also have a tick next to it that's going to say the scenario is being completed. So if you have 1 or 2 scenarios, not going to make much of a difference. If you've got 9 or 10 or 11, and you're slowly working through different ones, and there's different members of the team on there as well, it's going to make a lot of sense knowing which one's being completed and which one hasn't. Great, awesome. So the last thing I want to cover as well is to show you guys how to quickly copy a scenario. So it's really important, as I've said along the way, to have that status quo scenario. But the main benefit of having the status quo is once you have that, you can then go ahead and copy it and make any changes. So you can see here, I've been refining my status quo by 3 or 4 different options and trying to get the best one. You could have deleted those ones previously or kept them there, but I've then ended up on the final one that I wanted, which is the second to last one. And then I wanted to go ahead and make a copy and create a milk price forecast change scenario. And that's what I've done. So basically all I've done on that top one is just make a copy and change the name of it. But just look at what a difference that makes at the top in knowing what exactly the scenario is for. So definitely make use of that. And so to do that, you can go ahead and click on the 3 dots that sits next to each scenario at the very end on the right-hand side. And it's going to throw up this option here, where you get the option to mark as complete, copy, or delete. And go ahead, obviously, and select copy. So the first thing it's going to do is take you into that main first page we saw, where you can choose the duration and the start year and the name, etc. So we've been through that before. You guys know what to do on that page. The main thing you want to be doing on there is confirming that the length of the scenario is correct, but also that the name is what you want it to be. And then that's when you're going to have all that benefit of being popped into a brand new copied scenario that's the exact copy of your status quo. And you go ahead and start messing around with that as much as you want. And you know that you've got your main status quo saved and ready to go. Awesome, awesome. So that now brings us properly to the end of the scenarios. So again, we'll stop for a second for some questions as well. I see I already have one, so I'll jump across quickly and see what that question is. Hi there. So we've got a question. I thought depreciation was an auto-calculable field based on depreciation rates in the asset class setups. So that's our intention there, Clay. It's not how it currently works. So depreciation right now is a completely manual field. So what you're going to have to do is work out the depreciation expense across all of your asset types, enter that in there, and then go ahead up into each of those assets and individually revalue those at the desired amount for each year. Now, as I said before, the tie-up of these two is a major thing for us. So we are working on that. And as you've seen some of the other great updates that have happened in the last year, you should hopefully see that done soon as well. Hope that answers your question. Thanks, Declan. Awesome. So we don't have any questions coming through right now, but for those of you still on the line, it'd be nice. I'm going to jump into the main part of Figured now and just take a look at how we can actually model a price change and how some of the enabling and disabling of the milk custom values would work as well. So if you don't want to look at this and you guys feel like you're done, you have no questions, thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope to see you again soon and have a great day. For those of you who do want to hang around and have a look at what it is, by all means do so. I'm going to jump over to that now. Awesome. So hoping most of you can see my screen now. Yes, if you can't see my screen, just reach out to the chat and let me know. Cool, perfect. I'll take that as we are good to go. So the first thing we're going to do is expand our main income area. So we can see here, we've got our main scenario. This is our milk price forecast change scenario that we're using. So over on the bottom here, we've got an income option. I can click on that and I can see that my tracker that I imported in. So if I click to open that up, what I'm showing here is the milk tracker, but this time with the custom monthly values disabled. So I spoke about earlier, if you untick the custom monthly values, you're going to be just shown the three main boxes where you can just enter in top line information about your milk production. And here we see this in action now. We've unticked it and we have all three fields editable like so. So the first thing I want to do is potentially look at, all right, how do I model a price change? If we go and click in here, we can say, look, we want our price change to be $6.40 for now, for example, just to carry us to the end of the year. We're going to head down to the spreading option. The first thing we're going to do is make sure we have the right year selected. So I'm using 2020 just there. So I want to make sure my spread is from 2020. Now I don't want to increase the price. I just want to spread the price. So I can leave it at 0 and hit spread. And there we go. It's copied $6.40 across to the subsequent years of the scenario. So what we could even say as well is that, you know, realistically, it's kind of stayed here for until the end of the 2020 season. And we see afterwards getting worse. And so really, really quickly, we can enter in what future milk price changes might do and hit save. And that's going to calculate over the whole 5 years of the scenario while maintaining our current expense position, maintaining everything about our current state of business. So very quickly, before you go make any other changes, you can look and say, all right, well, would this income change with my current expenses that I go through, or just anything that happens on farm, it doesn't really make much sense. So you need to adjust and move forward. But just even making that change just shows you a whole lot of different insight. You could even go in here and say, look, what if it gets worse after that? And then we get into some really crazy territory. Either way, it's entirely up to you. What you might want to do is you might want to leave that as such at $6.40 and instead look to maybe increase your production and see, first of all, can you do that? How is it possible to do that? But if you figure out that you can do it, enter it in here and see what the benefit of it might be. Alternatively, so you can do that just up here by saying, all right, let's just move that up to 140, maybe 150,000. And then make sure I've got 2021 selected here and then go spread. Alternatively, I can say, look, I want to make a 0.5% increase each year. And I'll do that as so. Now that's also done that to the price and also to the peak cows moo. So we can just go in and manually adjust those back if we need to $6.40 and $6.40. Now what you could also do is enable use custom monthly values. And what you will notice down here is we don't have a milk curve set. So you'd want to make sure you've got the milk curve set so your production is occurring in the right times of the year and your payments are coming through in the right times of the year. But you could also have the premium rate option to either mess around what it would look like by going to winter milking, for example. And this premium rate option is going to help you do that. And you can just flick back and forth between the seasons by using this drop down here. Once we're satisfied with that, we can go ahead and hit save, and that's going to save it for us as well. And then what we want to do at that point is probably go into expenses and take a look at how we can either bring our expenses down or up by a certain amount. And like I said before, if we open up expenses here, we head into farm working expenses, we can head down to the bottom and reduce all of our expenses by a certain amount or just selected one. So, from 2020 onwards, we can say negative 1.5% and spread that. And that's just brought each price down by negative 1.5% over the subsequent years. And that could be, a goal you want to work towards. You could just be doing to see what the effect of that has, and then sort of go through and be like, is that realistic? I've reduced my shit expenses by X amount. Can that still cover shit expenses? So again, it creates more questions sometimes than answers. And that's the whole point of this, is to create as many questions as you can and try and answer those questions here in the scenario, and be able to gain that insight as fast as possible. Awesome. So we had a question I saw there. I'm not sure where it's gone now. Hopefully that means I answered the question. But yeah, so there we go, guys. That's what I wanted to show you quickly is how to jump into the milk tracker and readjust your forecast and see what that looks like, and be able to jump down into the custom monthly values and do that as well. But more importantly, then head into your expenses and start adjusting those accordingly to get an accurate picture of what it looks like. Cool. Awesome. Awesome. So we had a question, and I'll just read it out for everyone. It's already been answered by one of my colleagues, it looks like. So it looks like my lease costs have come through in the farm working expenses. So should I zero that value out and build it into the proposition lease and rent expenses area? And so basically the question, the answer to that is it's entirely up to you. They both are going to be showing up in the expense side. They both are calculated exactly the same. So if you want to, you can. I would suggest using the lease and rent option in the scenario, because it's just been built in and it probably has a better breakdown or in the report section. However, you're not going to be losing out if you don't do it. So that's entirely up to you. If it's too difficult, don't worry about it. But I would suggest using the lease and rent if it's there. Awesome. And then once again, just before we to cut out here, guys, is in the main chat, one of my colleagues has just posted in the Farmer Resource Center link. So figure.com/resource-center. So jump on there. It's going to have a whole lot of resources for you every day on Figured, how to get help, when the next session is, so on and so forth. So again, sorry, it's just been posted into the right place. It was just to a panelist before, but now you can see it in your chat. So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to go in there and just copy that. But other than that, we are done, guys. Well done, everyone. And if you follow along on your scenario as well, well done. But like I said, if you want to go back over what we've covered here today, this is also going to be uploaded to YouTube, hopefully by tomorrow. So I'll give another minute or so if anybody's got any more questions. But if you don't, thanks again, everybody, for joining. You're more than welcome to shoot off now. Hope everyone has a great rest of their week. And yay, almost out of lockdown level 3. Thanks, guys. Bye.